The Spiel Canal, yet another gaming channel with no budget for animation or even a catchy tune.
Hello, I'm going to talk about campaigns. I'm going to talk about my campaign. The background video won't have too much to do with the topic, just some things I recorded to use as footage while I prattle on. So if you want to do something else, some painting, some modelling, you can just treat this like a podcast, it'll be fine. I might put a couple of things in now, but nothing major. As I've mentioned previously, I recently embarked on a Necromunda campaign. So we've just wrapped it up now. It lasted about 2 months. I wanted to give a little info as to how we started, how it went, and I hope this assists you in your own campaign. Now this is a true story about real people I've become very friendly with. And any negatives in the video, it's not a criticism of them. This is just my own thoughts and reflections and a healthy exercise in identifying what I liked and disliked and what I would do the same and what I would change. So, background, context, how it all started. The proprietor of my local game store wanted to run a Necromunda campaign. That's Jim, by the way. But being the busy dealer in plastic goodness he is, he asked if your humble narrator and another hive scummer, who I will call Rob, because that's his name. Anyway, he asked if Rob and I would do the honours. More and more people were taking an interest in Necromunda in the store. House books were coming out thick and fast. And the two of us were there quite regularly, and we appeared to be the most knowledgeable of the game. Arguable, but fine. So it made good sense to subcontract that out to some people that were familiar with it so that we could give new players exposure to the setting, let them experience what it's like to progress your gang through a campaign, as well as help, sort of reinforce those rules. I don't know about you, but just reading it in the rule book isn't sufficient. I need to play several times to help sort of embed these mechanics. Also, I'm sure that if people saw us having fun, then maybe they would take the dive as well and Jim could sell some more plastic. So Rob and I were quite keen to start off. I wrote a narrative concerning the expansion into a newly available area of Hive Crucible, blah, 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 blah. Nothing new there. Rob suggested a Dominion campaign, pretty standard default affair. It's a good introduction for new players. It's where you have a phase 1 where you're fighting over unclaimed territories, a downtime where a chance to kind of reset and measure where things are, and then a phase 2 where you are fighting your opponents again, but to capture their territories or they're trying to take yours. Also, we played into the unknown variant. So what that means is you don't know those territories that you're trying to capture in the first phase, that you kind of find your opponent and you agree you're going to do a battle and you pick a territory at random. So that's when you find out if it's going to, if it's a good one or not. Rob and I had a few demo games. We set about creating a few house rules, not too many, but just a few things to help sort of balance some elements out. I'll give you the house rules that we created and a description of them, just in case you wanted to replicate them in your own games or campaigns. Some of these rules involve swearing, just getting it out of the way now. I can't fucking see them! So to simulate gangers, using smoke to shroud their movements, we've made it a tad more difficult to score wounds when using templates or blast weapons against fighters in smoke. So if you're firing into smoke and you can't see, so you don't have any equipment that negates smoke, if you're using a blast weapon, so like a grenade launcher or something like that, heavy crossbow, you pick the point where you want to attack and you don't roll to hit, you just roll scatter and you just take it from there because you can't see, obviously, what you're trying to hit. And then from that point, you follow the standard rules. If you've got a template weapon, so like a flamethrower or a web gun, that kind of thing, you place your template as you normally would, but your target receives a +1 modifier to their saving roll. So this will stack with other save modifiers that they might have. If they're in partial cover, it would go from a +1 to a +2 for their save. If they're in full cover, it would go +2, +3. So if you're in a situation where the weapon has a trait that ignores save rolls, like a web or gas, then even though those would normally ignore those saves, we still let you have the roll, which is kind of like a dodge, really. You get on a 6-up, you would still manage to somehow dodge the attack because the person firing can't see you. So like I said, though, if you had any war gear like photo goggles or something like that, then it would negate this rule and you would still just get to attack like normal. The reason we put this one in now is there is an FAQ that states that you can fire template weapons into smoke without being able to see what you're aiming, but it's not as accurate. It doesn't really clarify what that meant. So we just added this on as a way to kind of demonstrate that inaccuracy when you're in that environment. Next rule, bring everyone. Everyone! So you may find that some foes are too tough, especially after a long campaign riddled with injuries. So normally in a Dominion campaign, in pretty much any scenario really, if the gang rating, if there's more than 100 points difference in the gang rating, the person with the lower points can bring additional tactics cards. Now, we weren't using tactics cards in our scenarios. People could still bring a tactics card if they had that points difference. But we kind of said that if you didn't want to, you could just bring a Hive Scummer instead, and you would get like the normal Hive Scummer rules. So it's not a fighter that would progress with your gang, but they would just be helping you out on that one scenario. We kind of thought that the tactics cards, there's a lot of good and bad in the tactics cards, and obviously with these new players, they're not going to be familiar with those, and some of them can be really game changing, like very dramatically. So we decided that we weren't going to have them in now, but obviously you always had that option if you had tactics cards and had that points difference. We don't take kindly to your kind. So in Hive Crucible, your gang is obviously far from home, and locals, they don't like you. They've already been under yoke of some other authoritarian gang, and they're not really keen on that being subjugated by you. So it means that they are kind of disrupting your trade routes. So territory boons, you can only use those once a week. So passive abilities that you get from a territory, yeah, fine. Increases in reputation, that kind of thing. But if you were getting, some like infiltrate or some special weapon traits or something, you had to pick a scenario you'd use it in. One of the reasons we put that in now was kind of to tweak people that were accruing lots of extra abilities because they were available to play a lot more, that they weren't snowballing away from those that just didn't have that opportunity. So we had 9 gangs signed up. Oh, we had one other rule as well, sorry. We also had one that Rob had come up with from which he'd used in a previous campaign, which I thought was really great. It's really sort of Necromunda-y feel to it. It's called By the Emperor. Did you see that? So the Underhive, obviously, it's a crazy place, crazy people, crazy things. And at the end of the match, if a ganger has successfully achieved some highly improbable feat, then they can be awarded an extra D3 XP during the reward step. Now, the feat had to be agreed by both parties, and obviously it had to be successful. So it could be, like they survive like a 10-foot fall, or they win a 3-in-1 combat one where they're outmatched and, not like they were going to win that, but they've kind of just thrown themselves into it anyway. Not 10 feet, about 10 feet, 10 inches, 10-foot fall, that'd be ridiculous. Yeah. If they survive a 10-foot fall, then they definitely deserve D6 XP. So it's a case of use your best judgment, discuss it with your opponent after the match, or just sort of flag it while it's going on about things that you try to do and it paid off, because that's part of what Necromunda is. It's about doing something that's a bit unlikely and not something that any kind of proper trained militia would do, but screw it, you're just some gangers. So when we announced this rule, the bonus XP for this like Daredevil tactics, some people were questioning us about abusing it and how they could abuse it or how others might abuse it. And we were confident that would be fine. It has to be agreed by both players after all. So on reflection, that these were the questions people were asking should probably have been a red flag to me, but I just didn't notice it. So yeah, we had our 9 gangs and we set our date for kicking it off, and we did. After about a first week, 8 of the 9 gangs had a battle, and one of them just hadn't found the time yet. We realised we needed to add some additional rules. They were, let them rest for pity's sake. So obviously your gangers aren't robots, which is a shame, obviously, but they need time to patch up their wounds, especially when they've taken a bullet to the knee. So when a fighter goes into recovery, if you're familiar with the mechanics, kind of says that they miss their next match if they're in recovery. What the rule says is that match that they miss has to be on a different day. So if you had a battle on Monday, your fighter would be in recovery until at least your second game on a Tuesday, or obviously a different day, whatever. So you couldn't just have another match on Monday and then get them out of recovery. The next one we had, the last one, was come back upon your shield. So obviously it's a new hive, new opportunities. Everyone wants to get rich or die trying. So gang leaders, they're not just going to run away from a fight. So we said that you can't voluntarily bottle until at least 2 of your gang members are seriously injured or out of action. And that can include brutes and hive scum and bounty hunters and whatnot. Okay, hold it. I need to change this background video. This is shit. I need to do a separate video about this game. Poxy Necromunda Hive Wars, don't even bother. So if you haven't guessed already, these additions were introduced because some of the players who had fighters in recovery, they'd have a second quick game and choose to bottle as soon as they could to get the fighters out of recovery. And I'm not looking to disparage those players because technically that's allowed, and most people were new to the game. They were looking at what they could do and what they couldn't do. But we felt it really kind of undermined the recovery mechanic to do it that way. And on top of that, it also disadvantaged people. So if you didn't have time, like say you had a long scenario on Monday, you didn't have time to have another one, but your opponent did, then that opponent, when they fight the next person, they're going to have their full gang pretty much, and when you fight your next person, you won't have your full gang because you've not recovered your fighters. And you could end up then where you end up with that disparity on your credit rating, just from like your second or third game. So we just thought that's not really very sportsmanlike. So we implemented those rules, and people were fine with it. They understood. So as I said, the campaign had a phase, phase one, and then downtime, and then another phase. So in downtime, any fighters you've got in recovery, they kind of come out, and you have a chance to have some friendlier battles where there's no territories involved. Or if you just want to have a holiday, which I think some people did, they took a break for a little bit. But anyway, for the downtime, Rob, the trooper he had come up with a few different sort of narrative battles that you could do, and your actions in those battles fed into a arena battle that was at the end of downtime. And then the arena battle, you could only have a few gangers in it, and it was like a multi-person battle. And in the arena, there would be random loot items that you could find to fight with, and there was also traps, and the walls would close in, and it was a lot of fun. But unfortunately, by downtime, our 9 people that had started had gone down to 5 people. And even for that arena battle, we had to fight it over 2 evenings because we couldn't get all 5 people to meet at the same time. So we finished downtime, we start phase 2, and it's kind of limping along. We're down to 4 people now. So me and Rob finally got a match. It was the first match we had of the campaign, and it was a really good one. It was very sort of Necromunda-y. It's exactly the sort of thing you'd want if you're experienced Necromunda, where it has all those cool mechanics. We had like bomb rats and traps and flamers, and you weren't sure who was going to win. It looked like it was comfortably going to Rob, and then it looked like I might be able to edge it back, but Rob won at the end of the day. But it was a really fun game, and we thought we're going to call the campaign now, because people are drifting onto other games, or they're looking at other campaigns that they want to do for like 40k or something like that. And so people were just kind of dropping away. Somebody just disappeared and never saw or heard from them again. So hopefully they're all right. And it just made sense. It made sense at that point. Okay, let's draw a line under the sand. Under the sand, can't it? That's no good, is it? A line under the sand. Let's draw a line in the sand, and we can look to our next project. And that's where we are now. So I asked for some feedback from the group, and obviously I reflected myself on what I liked and what I didn't like. So what went right, what went wrong, what was a bit meh, how would I improve things? So the stuff that was good, there was a lot of enthusiasm at the beginning. Certainly started with meeting the needs of the new players. I put up Jim put a poster up for me that I made. It accomplished its goal of reinforcing the game mechanics with new people that weren't that experienced with Necromunda. I liked that the players were fine with the additional rules, that they embraced them, and also that they were more than happy with us to tweak the mechanics as things progressed, as we sort of realised that certain things weren't meeting the desired result. So Rob and I created a shared online folder where we put those house rules as well as the campaign mechanics and some various other bits and pieces, and made it accessible to everybody. And it sort of had the pre and post scenario steps and that kind of thing, and it was all in one single file. So Rob and I own most of the books between us, but we thought not everyone does, and they can be a little bit, what should we say? They're not very approachable, the books. Things are kind of scattered all over the place. So having this one document, I was told, really helped. And obviously anything that we tweaked, Rob would update it really quickly, and then we would just let everyone know there was a new version. This isn't an exhaustive list of what went right and what went wrong. This is just my initial thoughts, and obviously conscious of how long the video will be. So what went wrong? So I think I should have been clearer on how to organise games, or taken charge in collating the available dates of people and then assigning them games, like in a league or something like that. I kind of went with a free-for-all method where I kind of said, okay, this week arrange your matches and let us know who you're fighting, when you're available, blah, blah, blah. And I think some people struggled to find opponents, and then they either were falling behind, or they at least felt like they were falling behind, and then their interest in the campaign would wane. I think the mystery territories was a bad call for an intro campaign. Obviously, that was my call. I wanted that, and I thought it'd be a bit mysterious and stop people going straight for the good stuff. But really what it did was just create confusion. It made it harder for the new players to understand what the perks were, what their boons were, and how they applied. I think if they'd have had greater exposure to those from the beginning of what they were, then they could have raised those questions before they got those territories, and I think that might have helped. I think removing tactics cards was actually a net negative, really. Taking those cards out reduced how some people could handle some gangs. The corpse grinders really started to run away with it, and obviously with their ridiculously low point costs and their initiates, like that can take anything and have infiltrate, I think that some of the tactics cards might have helped some players with handling that kind of thing. Finally, I don't think that I gave enough boosts to people that were struggling. Like narratively, you can easily do that. Benevolent house gifts or the like. They can be good ways to give a trailing gang some much needed creds or loot or even dues just to get them re-energized and back on their feet. And the plan was to sort of let the first phase go through and then in downtime give some kind of tiered support package to people. But we were down to so few people that it just kind of didn't make any sense anymore. And the writing was on the wall for where the campaign was going. So what was the grey? Well, what's kind of one of the key things that I've taken away from this is, well, okay, if you need to, I think if you need to have an understanding of Necromunda and what Necromunda is and what it's about and what it isn't about. So Necromunda is not a balanced game. I've never known it to be balanced. I don't think anyone's ever claimed it was balanced. I don't mind that it's not balanced because I play it for the laughs, the lols, the lolcats. It's not competitive. It's not like 40k. You find the aesthetic of a gang that you like and you name your gang, you get attached to them and you carve out your story. A little bit like those old like create your adventure storybooks sort of thing I used to read when I was a kid. So you need to understand that and you need to know that your opponents feel the same as you. In that I mean that if people want to play to win, they can. But if you're playing rule of cool and they're playing play to win or win at all costs, then you're usually going to lose. But but even if you don't, you might not enjoy it because maybe your opponent gets quite disgruntled that they weren't getting the results they wanted because they're really taking everything way too seriously. Now, I don't mind losing. I don't. I mean, sometimes sometimes obviously I don't want to lose, but generally I don't mind losing as long as I'm having fun. I've had more fun losing a good match like the one I had against Rob than winning a one-sided one. But that's me. Obviously that's not everyone. But that's what I would want from the people I'm playing in a campaign with. And if you want to do win at all costs and you want to research the best ways to win, like in the 40k meta scene, then it can kind of ruin it for the others. If I'm teaching someone how to play, I generally would use sort of Palanites or Goliaths or Genestealer Cult and not like Van Saar, because I want them to have an enjoyable game. And Van Saar are a very overpowered shooty side, and new players aren't going to know how to counter that. And you can end up with the same thing in the campaign, especially with new players. They don't know how to counter those overpowered sides. So, not to say that you can't try and play Necromunda competitively. If that's what the people in your campaign want to do, then fine, go for it. Especially if you're much more experienced players, maybe you want to be more ruthless. But that's not the way that I would want to play that game. And I think that a good chunk of the people that signed up didn't want to play it that way either. And that kind of drove people away. I mean, you've got, if that's not how you want to play, then it can ruin your hobby night or hobby day or whatever. And you might, decide to leave the campaign. And can you blame anybody for doing that? I mean, your most valuable asset is your time. And if you're not enjoying yourself, you just note right out of there. I mean, I've done it before. I'm not enjoying this game. I'm going to just call it. Bye-bye. So another thing as well that wasn't really the way I wanted it to be, but wasn't really sure what I could do about it, was the narrative. So people obviously want a more narrative-driven story in these kind of things. And Rob and I had our ideas, but we just didn't have the time to write it the way we would want to write it for 9 gangs. I mean, it reduced later, but it was kind of a bit late then. I mean, some people can do that, and hats off to them if they can, but we just didn't know what the shortcuts were of being able to write a narrative, that would suit that many people on a weekly basis. If I was to run another campaign, I would spend longer in the setup, sort of creating that narrative before it started off. I'd storyboard some parts, some elements, some twists and turns. In fact, I'm kind of doing that right now. I'm kind of creating a test campaign for a Necromunda with vehicles. I'm going to do as like a very small group test version of it. But, I'm putting the narrative part in now. It's going to have much more emphasis on that. And also, one of the things that you can do to help sort of reinforce the way you want to do your campaign is you can change the rules. Why not? That's what I would probably do going forward. I think I would, obviously I've got a rule book, which is great, but it can be quite confusing for people. And I would, borrow from that, but I would add in some pretty big changes, I think, to make it more of a story driven campaign. I mean, I bought the books, I bought the models, they belong to me. It's not a live subscription service. I can change whatever the hell I want. I mean, as long as obviously my opponents agree and the people who are in my campaign agree, I wouldn't be surprising them with some drastic change. But if I want to add in some additional rules, that affects overpowered gangs, or I want to add some things and take some bits away, go for it. One of the ideas I've got for my next campaign is that at gang creation, you can't take any champions. You can take a leader as normal. You can take gangers. You can take juves, and that's it. But you don't have the same weapon restrictions. And while you still gain some XP, you can't use it in quite the same way. You will perk your stats by being good at certain actions or rolling well on certain actions, almost like game achievements. Like maybe your weapon skill improves because you keep fighting, you keep winning in fights. You're doing successful. You keep successfully shooting people at long range, and so your ballistic skill improves at a certain point. That kind of thing. Maybe you keep getting shot and keep getting flesh wounds and keep getting back up, and you're not being taken out of action, and so you get the like unstoppable trait where you can start regenerating flesh wounds if you get seriously injured. If you look at sites like Goonhammer, which is a great site, I'd certainly recommend it. They do a lot of articles. I'm sure most of you have already read it anyway. They always give like a nice breakdown of where the power creep is and the sort of things that you might want to address in your campaign. And they also give like nice breakdowns of like tactics cards and that kind of thing as well. They do some gang lists in now. They're not always gang lists I would go with. Some of them do seem very, playing it in a way, what's the way to maximize we can out of this gang rather than just, what would I want to do? But they do also have some other gang lists in there that are more fun. I'm sure I saw like a Palanite one where like everybody had a shield or something. Just try and balance out what you're doing. Make sure that you're adding and you're taking away. Don't just make everyone Superman. But, try and have fun. And if you know that some things are unbalanced in the game, then maybe tweak some bits to address that. Because, it sure looks like the bloody book writers aren't considering it. If I could just summarize it, because I've been prattling on for a while, I would encapsulate the advice into a giant fortune cookie of just kind of saying, know your audience, communicate clearly with them from the outset and what you're trying to achieve with this campaign. Have a loose story to tell, one that can roll with the punches of what players choose to do. And if you're taking on the responsibility of an arbiter, keep an eye out to make sure people are having fun, that they're not falling behind. Tie it in with how they're getting perks or bonuses or what negatives they might be getting if they are running away with it. Oh my God, the local community has kind of got together and, they're overcharging them or they're not allowing them into the trade hub or something. Just something that kind of throws a spanner in their works. And people have a good idea of what they want to achieve. I think people do like the adversity of you adding something in that's unexpected, just not totally unfair, but just something that makes them think about what they were doing and readjust their plans rather than just being on cruise control for their campaign. I hope this doesn't come across as too negative because I'm really glad I did the campaign. I'm really glad I got a chance to play games with people that I see in passing but, haven't had a chance to play with before. And I certainly hope that they join me for future efforts where we go back to maybe Hive Crucible or somewhere else and, we do things a little bit differently and, we get a chance to battle again. I want to give a shout out, a thank you to Rob for all his assistance in partnering me with this campaign. Also, those house rules, he came up with the titles for those. I thought they were great. He's been really good at coming up with various bits and pieces and communicating with me about what his plans are and what he would like to do. And I've really appreciated it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thank you for watching my videos. Hopefully subscribing. Please subscribe, please. And until next time, stay safe, have fun, and, fight the law. Oh, also, so next video, I think I will have to address that background footage of that first game, Necromunda Hive Wars, because it's shit. I wasn't going to make a video on it, but then I started playing it some more so I could make some background footage, and then I realised I have to make a video on that game. This isn't going to become a video game channel at all in any way. But I feel like there might be sometimes just something that I need to address, and that is one of those games I need to address it. It feels like just such a missed opportunity. I don't want to give it away. If you see the video come up, then please watch. Thanks again for your time, and I look forward to entertaining you in the future.
You're a Mozart fan. I love him too.
I love Mozart.